Thank you for being here tonight, and I want to introduce the committee members that are here tonight with us. We have Jeff Curry on the end, Candy Poole, we have J.J. Graham, Billy DeWitt, and myself, Alan Gilbert. And we appreciate you being here. We're going to go through our presentation. We want you to feel free to ask questions. We would like to give you any information that we possibly can, and we feel like our job as a committee is to listen to the public and to try to decide what is in the best interest of the city of San Angelo and the police department and the citizens of San Angelo. And this committee has taken their job very, very seriously. So we've talked to a lot of people outside of our committee meetings. And so we're taking all of that in. But we do want to encourage you tonight to ask any questions that you would like to. We're going to have a poll to start with, and I'm going to ask Billy if she would to explain that to you right quick.
Well, I'll say good evening, and thank you for being here. We're expecting more people, but we're so thankful that you're here. And I know we have 3 council people here. We have our mayor and Lucy and Harry in the back. So thank y'all for so much for supporting us and getting us started on this. We really appreciate it. So the poll that we're going to take, did everybody get a slip of paper to take the poll? Because I would like for everyone in the room to take the poll. And it's an anonymous poll, and basically all it says, it's very simple. We aren't trying to identify anyone, and I think Heather is going to have a box or something that you can put these in. We're not trying to identify where anybody is, but we want to know before we do this presentation, what were you thinking about the chief of police? Should it be elected, should it be appointed, or something else? And then after the presentation, are you still where you were when we began, or do you have some different thoughts about whether it should be an elected or appointed or, something else? So that's going to be our poll. And as Judge Gilbert said, if you have any questions, please feel free, to do that. But I think it's important for us to get feedback from the citizens that's going to be impacted in the community by having an elected or appointed. So it's important for our voices to be heard. And we all feel better when we get to have a say in something, whether, our thoughts are what actually happens or somebody else's thought, the fact that you have an opportunity to participate. So that's what we're wanting to do here today, is to get feedback, input from the citizens, and we'll just get started. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Billy. And those polls that you have, you can look at that. It's very simple, and so you can fill that out and turn it in if you would at the end. We're going to go ahead and begin with our presentation, and tonight JJ and Candy are going to present to you a lot of information, and then at the end of that, then we will ask for questions if you have. If you have any questions that are burning during the presentation, just raise your hand. There's a small crowd here. We'll be glad to stop right there and answer any questions that you may have. Okay, JJ?
All right, sir. Good evening, and again, thanks for coming out. I'll use my instructor voice, so we should be okay. Quickly to review. I'm doing that, okay. The committee's revised purpose, what we were assigned to do, what we were asked to do, is to look at the city charter, specifically look at the role of the police chief, elected versus appointed. We did a lot of work on that, and we recommended to the city council on August 2nd that we proceed with an outreach program like we're doing here today to educate the public on all the findings that we had and to elicit their feedback. So before we make a recommendation either way, we like to get some feedback from the citizenry. Educate is a good word, but I think also another good word is to make an informed voter. We want to make sure the voters are informed on all the facts so they can be an informed voter regardless of which way they vote. So we have to deliver our final recommendation to City Council in January 2023. So we have a few months to now go through this process, solicit some feedback, sift through it, and come up with a final recommendation. And the City Council must call the election by February 17th. So we have a little bit of time left to work this out, so the city can call the election for the May 6th election. Our research process was, we were pretty busy researching this. We met a number of times over a period of 5 weeks. Approximately 16 hours were spent in official meetings and 20 hours on individual research. Each of us talked to our friends, neighbors, people we work with, and just, hey, what do you think? What are you feeling? So we didn't target a specific audience. We tried to get everybody's input. Unofficially, just casually talk about it. Again, not professing, I think it should be this way, it should be that way. Some direct feedback from people, and it was very surprising what we found out. We also did some official documentation. We researched section 60 through 64 of the city charter, and I was pretty amazed to read the entire city charter. It's quite a document, and it does need a little bit of work, but it covers a lot of information. And I think most people don't even know we have a city charter. So when I mentioned the city charter to people, where do I find that? So we told them where to find the city charter. So again, we're informing and educating people just by talking to them. We looked at some local and state statutes and regulations. Texas Local Government Code, Chapter 143, the Civil Service Statute. Texas Local Government Code 142, Meet and Confer Statute. And the San Angelo Civil Service Regulations. All these have a role in the city for the chief of police. We interviewed elected and appointed officials to get their feedback and informal conversations with personal contacts, which I mentioned already. Just give you a brief recap or what each of these sections are. The section 60 is the chief of police. And all it says is this is hereby created the elective office of the chief of police for the city of San Angelo. So that states right there, we elect our police chief. So if anything's going to be changed, it would have to be this, but that's the way it stands right now. The next section is the one I got the most feedback on, the most surprise, most people saying, say that to me one more time. Section 61, qualifications. Okay, in order to be the elected chief of police for San Angelo, shall have been a resident of the city of San Angelo for a period of at least 2 years, immediately prior to his election, and shall possess the qualifications of electors in said city. And you have to be 18 years old. So to be chief of police in San Angelo, you have to be 18 or above and live in San Angelo for 2 years. Nothing says of any law enforcement qualifications.
When it says, and shall possess the qualifications of electors, what's that?
That's if there's qualifications, for example, the city can add qualifications to a candidate. You have to have 5 years of law enforcement background. You have certain degrees, qualification levels, master in police status, things like that. They can be added by the city. This is the minimum right here.
But just to be the possessor of the qualifications is, if you're legal to vote, you're legal
Right.
to run. I
As
think
it
that's
stands
the best
right
way
now, that is
to
it.
define that.
Correct. I don't have the exact statute in front of me, but essentially you have to be 18 years of age. You have to reside within the district that would be pertaining to the election, which in this case would be the city of San Angelo. And then you'd also have to not be declared criminally insane or any sort of a felon that would prohibit you from voting.
That should narrow the field down a little bit.
So basically what that means is anybody that's 18 years old and can vote in the city of San Angelo can run for the position of San Angelo Police Chief.
So people often ask, if I'm a felon, can I vote?
If you're off paper, Mayor, it's kind of the, I guess, the simplest way they talk about it. But if you fulfilled all of your probation, you're no longer on probation or parole or whatever, so that you're not reporting to anybody, you don't have to, then you can vote. A felon can vote. And that's something, excuse me, JJ, I'm sorry. That's something I was not everybody knows that you have to be off paper. And I was looking at the news today, and in Florida, they've just arrested 19 people that were felons and obviously were not off paper, but they did not really, know that they had to have fulfilled the full term of their conviction. in order to be able to vote. They didn't know that.
That's great to know those qualifications, because I hear over and over again, well, in this state, if you're a felon, you can vote. In this state, you can't vote if you're a felon. So that clarification, I think, is really important.
Yes, and I did not know that either, so it's good to know. Anything else? Okay. Next would be section 62, which deals with the term of office. Term of office shall be 4 years. So they're elected to a 4-year term as chief of police.
Are there unlimited terms?
Are there unlimited terms?
You mean elsewhere?
No, I mean, because as a city council member, I can run, I get 4 years, but I can only run twice. So the question mark, can the police chief run 6 times of 4 years each?
Right now,
Yes.
it's unlimited terms for the police chief.
Yeah, you can run till you're too tired of running anymore. Yes, ma'am.
But that's a very good question,
Yes.
because we had discussion about that, that, you know, the impact it would have if we considered term limits for the chief of police, because you could get a 40-year-old chief of police and say he can only, you know, have a 2-term limit, and he would, you know, be 48, and it's like, okay, I'm out of a job.
Right.
What do you do after you're the chief of police?
Yeah.
Go back to being a beat cop? Probably not.
That's one of the reasons why you don't see that in cities, because if they're going out hunting for chief of police, bringing a person in, nobody would take the job if they knew it was an 8-year limitation. So those are left open.
Okay. Next is section 63, the duties and powers. Shall be the duty of chief of police to preserve law and order within the city of San Angelo, and especially to enforce the ordinances of said city. I think that's a pretty good deal. That's what we hire them to do, so that's a good deal. The authority, okay. Chief of police shall have exclusive control of the police department of the city of San Angelo, and shall have the right to select, employ, discharge at will, and to prescribe the salaries of, within the monetary limits fixed by the city budget, the employees in such department. So they can have some effect on that.
May I address that just a minute,
Certainly,
JJ? I think it's very important that we look at this, because comments that we get a lot of times from people are that the reason they want to have one or the other is because they want them to have exclusive control of. Well, section 64 is outdated, because we have civil service, and civil service controls. You don't have an at-will situation in the police department, basically, because you have civil service that allows for decisions to be made by the chief and by the administration, but then there is an appeal to the civil service board. And so not all these decisions are just made by the chief. And so it's not really an at-will situation because of the civil service. And I guess you could say in certain cases it is, but in certain cases it's not. It gets really complicated, but it's not exclusive control as is stated in section 64. That's not how it is. Whether you're elected or appointed, it's going to be the same, though. It has no bearing on which one it is. I'm sorry, JJ.
No, that's good. That's good. Okay. And speaking of civil service, that's our next slide. The Texas Local Government Code, Chapter 143, Civil Service Statute. This has a big effect on the chief. Okay, that governs an appointed chief selection, appointed by city manager and confirmed by the council. It sets the minimum qualifications for police chiefs, and you already heard what our minimum qualifications are already. Qualifications and process for beginning positions. Probationary periods is for new hires, obviously. Eligibility and process for promotions, make sure it's fair and equitable. Regulates how officers are paid, again, within the budget. Regulates accumulation of payouts of sick and vacation leaves. Prescribes causes for removal or suspension of officers. Okay, so that's not just left somebody's whim, there's actual requirements. And allows for appeals of disciplinary suspensions or removal, and prescribes process for demotions. So everything is outlined, and trust me, I'm a civil servant, and everything is very regulated. There's a statute for everything, which is good, so that way personal opinions can't get in the way.
A comment there, please, JJ. our requirements, and I hate to keep doing this, our requirements for a beginning police officer are more than the requirements for our chief of police.
Oh, there you go.
Our requirements for a beginning police officer are more than the requirements to be the chief of police.
So it's more difficult to join the force than it is to run the force.
Judge, that's a great point.
Okay, and how many people know that? Okay, that's why we want informed voters, okay? People are emotional on both sides of the fence, but if you're informed, that makes it better, okay? And lastly, we looked at the Texas Local Government Code, Chapter 142, the Meet and Confer statute. This provides that designated police association and city administration can negotiate an agreement to supersede any state statute, local ordinance, or civil service rule relating to the employment of a police officer. So we can adjust hiring procedures.
JJ, may I address something right
Certainly.
here? Because we're trying to look at elected versus appointed. The civil service statute that we looked at is applicable for both elected and for appointed, except for the purposes of requirements of the chief. I wanted to make sure that there's not a difference there whether you're elected or appointed, except for the requirements to be the chief. I apologize.
No. And how we got a lot of information, I'm sorry, ma'am.
Does that mean that the police association has as much authority as the city administration in negotiating?
They negotiate with each other.
Right.
I'm going to sit over here so I can look back.
But that's going to be the same regardless. Once again, comparing elected versus appointed, it's going to be the same.
Right. And one of the things we did, we got a lot of good information out, is we interviewed elected and appointed officials. Obviously, in San Angelo, we have elections, and we've had some police officers in town that have left for appointed positions elsewhere. The 3 interviews that we did was Frank Carter, who is currently the elected chief of police here in San Angelo. We talked to Brian Dunn, former appointed San Angelo fire chief, so he was appointed. And we talked to Ed Kading, current appointed Brownwood chief of police, former San Angelo Police Department chief candidate, and former SAPD lieutenant. And they gave us their outlooks on appointed versus elected, and it was pretty good hearing from somebody like Ed in particular, who's been involved in both of them. So we got some good insight from these 3 individuals. Any questions?
Was there ever a time when the San Angelo fire chief was elected, not appointed? So that has always been the way it is.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I've never heard of
Are fire chiefs generally
appointed.
appointed? They're not.
I don't know of
elected.
any elected fire chiefs in the state.
Now, I'm from out of town originally. I won't say New Jersey, so I don't get any feedback from anybody. But my uncle was a fire chief up in New Jersey, and he was appointed. So,
Well, actually, the history of the chief, and Julia, please correct me if I get this wrong, but it was an appointed chief, and then went to an elected chief that had pretty much exclusive control. And then we went to civil service, which took back most of the control from the chief, and we've stayed an elected chief within a civil service city.
Yes, because before civil service, the chief had total control of every aspect.
yeah. And that's a little much for one person with that much control, I think, so. Checks and balances, right? Okay, well, that concludes my, my portion. I'm gonna turn it over now to Ms. Candy Poole, take it through the rest of the presentation. All right?
Yes. Thanks, JJ, and welcome, as everyone else has welcomed you. I'll also do the same. In doing this process, as the judge said, or JJ did, that we talk to people out in the community, people that we go to church with, people that our kids might go to school with, our friends, our neighbors. We made a point of trying to visit with a lot of people. And we were surprised at some of the comments that were made. And let me just give you, under this informal conversation that we've been having over these few months in our personal contacts, just common themes that we heard. And one of them is this one. Not again. You're discussing this again. That was one of them. And we had to correct them a little bit because it's not like it's every time we have an election that we talk about this. In fact, we realize that it's been many years since this has been on the ballot. It's not like it was on the ballot last November. One of the other ones is, and this one's a hard one to answer, that there is widespread distrust of city government. Or even if you put that with the next one, the city runs a buddy system with self-interest by city management and taking priority over city needs. Let me just comment on that myself personally. I have worked for the city under many different committees. I've been fortunate enough that a council member thought I might be good enough to help with the charter committee years ago. I've been on the rental committee years ago, on the sidewalk committee. I've been on ZBA, and I'm on this one. And one of the things I'll tell you is, if you want to serve, there are 7 council members who would put you on anything if you just tell them you want to serve. They have no priority on who it is. They want citizen input. They want citizens to serve. And so I have a real problem with that, because that's a conceptive idea that if you understand what really goes on, you'll know that that's not the way the city of San Angelo has run and has not been for years. Under Daniel, especially in the last 10 years, we've had numerous opportunities for new committees because we're growing as a city. And so I take that particular comment, and just personally, I know that that's not the way things run. Another comment was, the city just wants to appoint someone that would do their bidding. Again, same kind of thought process, and I don't believe that that works. And let me give you an example of that. I'm serving I've been voted on by the City of San Angelo, the San Angelo SAISD, and the Tom Green County Appraisal Commissioners, and all of the small appraisal districts in our Concho Valley in Tom Green County, to serve on the Tom Green County Board of Directors for the appraisal district. I've been doing that now I'm going on 5 years. It's a 2-year term. I've been on it twice. I've been reappointed. Not once in those 5 years, not once in those 5 years has anyone from any of those entities, the school board, the county commissioners, the city of San Angelo, or the city of Cristobal, or any of that, have they called me and said, what about this? We want you to do that. Nobody. It is an independent appointment, and we should appreciate that process. So that's the way most of these committees are run. It's you get on it and want to serve, and you're going to be doing the job that they appointed you to do, not their bidding. Another comment is the city wants to control the police budget. Well, they already control the police budget. If you understood anything that we found in our charter as a committee, the police chief cannot go spend millions of dollars that the city of San Angelo doesn't take in. And so the budget that is done for the city of San Angelo encompasses the Visitors Bureau, the fire department, the police department, the running of all of our maintenance. All of those things are in that budget. And the police chief has to stay within and work within the budget given to him by the city of San Angelo. And so that is a comment that someone just doesn't know the real answer to that one. Go ahead.
What I would say, however, is that in the budgeting process, there probably is more opportunity to try to influence city council members with what the police might want for their budget than there is in the total budgeting process.
Probably that is correct. And you know that better than I would know that. But the police chief, though, does not set his own budget. Some of the common reactions were also shock. We also heard what some of the requirements are, and some of those that I talked to that sit on some committees, who come to city council meetings, who attend other events in the city, kind of what I thought were knowledgeable people about how things are kind of run. When I would ask the question, what do you think the qualifications are for our chief of police? And they would name off, well, they have to be a police officer. I'm not sure, but at least 5 years, I would think, was some of the comments I got. And boy, they better have some education behind them to be able to run that department. I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years of some education or something like that was another comment I heard. When you tell someone who has that thought process that the 2 qualifications for a San Angelo elected police chief is 18 years old and 2 years in San Angelo, mouths drop to the floor. Shock is what we hear, disbelief that we have no qualifications more than that. And so we've run into, all of us in asking those questions, we've run into many of our citizens that just have no idea. Part of why, when we were hearing all of this, is why we decided to do a opportunity this fall and had asked the council to give us a little more time to be able to go out in the community and to visit and to give information that's correct information so that our voters can decide what they want to do. Yes, we'll make a recommendation, but voters still are going to be voting on this one way or the other. And we want them to at least go to the poll with correct information. We didn't know all of it. We learned something tonight. And so we don't know it all. We thought we were doing a really good job, but we're going to learn some more just from the questions that are asked. The lack of knowledge that our citizens may have, one of the things that JJ talked about was the regulation, the authority. We know our police chief, because of civil service, Texas Civil Service statute, really doesn't have all that full authority just to willy-nilly do everything they want to do. They have to adhere to Texas law under this statute. And I know for a fact, listening to Teresa, our city attorney, in many cases over these months, that she knows that law almost verbatim, technically, and she will guide anyone that has questions about that law, our police chief, our fire chief, anyone in the departments, department heads, under that have some authority. She can give them that data and that information, and I think that is a resource that San Angelo should be very proud of. The committee has done, and through our research, we've had some findings that we have found, and some of that is we wanted to just sort of give that to you as information. The requirements of an elected police versus an appointed chief. So I'm going to start with elected first and tell you some of the things we found out about an elected chief of police. The requirements to be in San Angelo, the chief of police, do not include any prior police experience. Technically today, if we were having an election in November for police chief of San Angelo, I could run. I'm definitely over 18, And I'm definitely a citizen of San Angelo more than 2 years. And I think I'd make a really good police chief, so if you would like to vote for me, you could do that. Also, too, the San Angelo Police Department chief, due to civil service statutes that I just talked about, and the meet and confer rules, does not have that exclusive control over the department and its employees, as we all have thought for years and years and years. I think sometimes that we have a concept in our mind, and we're hard-pressed to change that if we're not given correct information. And so that's one of those. Also, too, that elected chiefs divide the department during the election period, which begins once the officers announce that they're going to be a candidate. We've seen this. Most of you that are here tonight probably have been around when we've had chief of police election, and you have 3 or 4 candidates, all from within the San Angelo Police Department, because you have to have lived here for 2 years. So we don't have any elected candidates coming in really from anywhere else. And so it does bring a toll on the police department, on the officers who might want this one but not that one, and this one, and it brings a toll on the department, and there can be some divisiveness, which is a negative situation. And any candidate will in the past would tell you the same. An elected chief who is also legally a city employee is also a legally city employee. He would be exempt from discipline when in violation of rules and policies. Let me say that one again, because this is a real issue that we found out has brought a lot of thought process to us, because if they don't have the requirement to be disciplined themselves, who over them is going to discipline them? Because they're elected, no one. No one. Okay? So if they do something wrong, let's say illegally or otherwise, only the citizens that elected that police chief can take a stand. And so that is a finding that brought us a lot of conversation in our findings. Now let's go to the appointed side and get a little information on having an appointed chief and what we found out about that. The Texas Civil Service Statute defines minimum requirements for an appointed chief of police. Minimum requirements. Some of those requirements are the very thing that we had the mouths dropped to the floor, are then education, having been a police officer before, things like that, that most of the people we talked to could not believe were not part of an elected. And so under that statute, some of those are minimum. Minimum being the floor, we as a city could add to that. We found that out from Teresa, who understands that statute. And so we, the citizens of San Angelo, could add to those minimums. Also, too, an appointed chief, if that was the case, due to those civil service statutes and the meet and confer, does not have exclusive control over the department or its employees. There's, under the appointment segment, the person in control in most cases, not all, and could be something else that we could bring forward to the citizens, is usually the city manager, as with all the other department heads in our city of San Angelo. From the finance department to the visitors bureau to all of those other departments, maintenance, they answer to our city manager. The police department is not divided when you have an appointed one in ranks during an election. You don't have that problem, but may be united in its disdain for a selected appointed chief if they get an outsider. San Angelo Police could say, our current police officers could say, we don't want anyone from the outside. But that would not be their decision. It would not be the citizens' decision. It would be whoever the city council gives that authority to. Usually, the city manager could be someone else, or some other entity like a committee or something like that. This chart
Candy,
that's
before you
next,
go on, can I clarify that? Ultimately, it would be the city manager that would make the recommendation to council, but
Yeah.
there is the ability to kind of prescribe process by which the city manager would have to find some people to make that recommendation.
Right.
So ultimately, per the statute, city manager makes the recommendation to council, who appoints the police chief in an appointed
it
situation.
lays with him or her, whatever
me,
the case
Candy.
may be.
I had a question asked me today, and Teresa, I want you to make sure I get this correctly, about that exact question right there. If there was a committee, could we recommend a committee that would even make up of, say, 2 appointed police officers to be on the committee? Can you designate who is on the committee, or just that there is a committee?
I'm still researching that completely to see what the parameters of that are, but as long, in my opinion, right now, today, as long as we're meeting the minimum requirements of the statute, which says that Daniel ultimately is the one that makes the recommendation to council, if there's a process ahead of time that's prescribed in our charter that governs how Daniel is going to select candidates to present to council, I have not seen or found anything yet, but I'm still looking, that would say that that's not a valid process. That we can, to some extent, I mean, there's lots of things that prescribe how city employees do their jobs, including the city manager to some extent. So I do not believe that that would be a violation, but again, I don't want to make that a definitive answer.
Okay, thank you.
Something else we've talked about. The chart you're seeing here kind of had the two side by side with the requirement that we have today in our charter of a elected chief, the 2 years as we've talked about. The eligibility to vote. In the U.S., to vote, you have to be 18 years old, and that's where the 18 years comes from, is the requirement to be able to be eligible to vote. Not a felon. We also talked a moment ago about that felon having completed everything could then become an eligible voter again. And, of course, not mentally incapacitated, which that would be already something that would be found out by whoever does the voting things. Also, too, under elected, we are governed by the civil service statute. And as are elected today, the department, the other negative, if you want to call it one, is divided sometimes during the election process. The police officers themselves. On the appointed side, and we've talked about this, right now the minimum requirement is 5 years as a licensed police officer and the TCOL intermediate certificate. And you do have to have that, and those are the 2 minimum requirements under the Texas statute. Also governed by that civil service statute, the 2 are the same. And then under the division from elected, the department may be united over disdain for an appointed chief. We've seen this in other cities, rather than someone out from outside the department itself. So there could be some negatives on either side of an appointed or an elected police chief. Go ahead.
Candy, excuse me just a minute. On that chart, would you go back to that chart, Judge? One of the things that I think we will have to clarify is if we look on the elected chief side where it says 2 years San Angelo residency, eligible to vote, and then it goes on to say not a felon. Well, you're still a felon whether you're on paper or off paper. And so, I think that would have to be clarified. So you're eligible to vote and you're still, a felon. So I just wanted to point that out because when we were talking earlier, if you're off paper as a felon, you are eligible to vote. But as this says right now, not a felon. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any reason
not be added to the elected chief's requirements under the city charter?
There is no, we are a blank slate technically. And so, yes, something like that could be added, something more, nothing less if you went to appointed. On the elected side, it could be the same thing. You could add it.
And what would be the process for that to happen? Does it have to go before the voters and everything?
This committee would make a recommendation, and that's part of this process in our thinking. Judge Gilbert, I don't know how many of you know him, but I've known him a long, long time, and he is a stickler for things being done correctly. And when we first sat down the first day, as we introduced ourselves, because some of us didn't know each other, and he said, I'm going to make it clear right now. He said, we're not going to have any thought process, and we're not going to discuss what we think. Individually, 7 people, we're not going to discuss that. What we're going to discuss is what we find out. We're going to do some study, we're going to do some investigation, and we're going to come back. We thought back 5 or 6 weeks into that we would have a report for the city council and a recommendation. When that 5 weeks was over, we were no closer to making a full recommendation because we didn't have enough data. We hadn't talked to the citizens enough, and the ones we had talked to, we could tell from their reactions that we needed to do more. We went to council, we presented much of this to the city council, and we asked them to allow us to have this fall season to do TV spots, to get some of this information out to you, having these forums. We'll have another one, and the judge will talk about that in a minute. And we spent time asking the council to realize that this was more important to be informed voters than one thing or the other. And so they gave us graciously until January, the end of January, their last meeting, to come up with our recommendation. And so that affords us the opportunity to do what we're doing today. We've not made, as a committee, any decision. And we personally don't sit and talk about, well, I feel and I think, unless it has to do with information that we've received. And it's been a real neat process. But one of the things is that we have been given that opportunity, and we will be going back to the city council, Judge, if you'll, thank you, in January. And we have made our schedule, our calendar to fit into that, and we will bring a final recommendation. It will then be the city council's decision to accept that recommendation or to do something different or to change it in any way, just like any other item on the city council agenda. It lays in those 7 people's hands. One of the things we decided to, in getting more time, was to develop this public outreach, which is what we're doing, and getting feedback, which is why you have a poll. We don't care who you are. We don't want your name on that poll. We just want to know how you think. So when we go back to our next meeting, we have your information and not just thinking what you think. We want to know what you think. So we have already worked with local media, and I'm going to let the judge talk about this on what they've done. He and Billy have been on TV presenting some of this, and I think there's some more going on. And Judge, I'll leave it to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Candy. Do we have any questions right now? Do we have any questions? Well, I'll address this, and as Candy said, we've tried to get out amongst the public as very much as we possibly could. We have, Billy and I went on the city's television, channel 17, I believe it is, and we talked a little bit there. We've done San Angelo Live, KLS TV, KSAN, and the slots, and trying to get with the public and let them understand some of the things we're doing. But that's a 2 and 3 minute segment. You know, I don't know, y'all don't know, some of you don't know me very well, but I can't say hello in 3 minutes. I mean, it's kind of tough. My wife says I talk way too much. But we want to get this out. Now, ma'am, I want to go back to what you said a while ago. We basically have 3 options that we're looking at. And option 1 is we just do nothing at all. And we just leave it the way it is. Option 2 is we say, you know what, let's still have an elected and let's require these things. And that would be recommended to the council, and then that would possibly be on a ballot, and then the citizens could vote yea or nay. Our third option is we could say, we believe it's in the best interest, and we would like to have an appointed chief of police. We would like for these to be the minimum requirements. We would like for a committee to be set up, and I'm just giving examples here, to be set up to work under the city manager for the purposes of interviewing and recommending to the city manager, who then recommends to the council. I mean, as Teresa said, some of these, and I've gotten a little too far there, but we can set up some of these thoughts and ideals that people can vote on. It doesn't just have to be elected versus appointed. It doesn't have to be that. It can be elected with this, it can be appointed with this. So it's what the committee comes up to when we have our last few meetings after we've talked to hundreds and hundreds of people, probably thousands. Then we will get back together. And she's correct. We have purposely not sat there and said, Billy, are you in favor of this or that? Are you in favor of this or that? We did a little straw deal to see where we were, but we have not been pushing that, because what we're pushing is informing and us getting the information first so that we know what we're talking about. It's nothing worse than us trying to talk to y'all and not know. We have turned over every rock that we could turn over, we believe. And these people have done a terrific job. Go ahead, Harry.
Certainly appreciate everybody working on this subject. But just for clarification, if we make a decision that we think we should put some qualifications on an elected, that's still got to be a citizen's, it's a change in the charter, so it's got to go for a vote. Those things have to be on the ballot. So those types of things, whatever the recommendation is in January to the council, and the council decides that they're going to put it on a ballot in May. Bottom line is we really need to look at a lot of things if we keep it as an elected. First of all, the police chief is an off year. It's off. It's not aligned with districts 1, 2, or 3. I mean, 1, 3, and 5, or 2, 4, and 6 in the mayor. It's got to be back aligned, because it costs about $25,000 for that off year for that police chief to run. So that's another thing. And I was on the last charter review committee before I was a council person, and that's one of the things that we didn't do right. And we really need to think about changing that. If we put qualifications out there, it's still got to be out there so that the citizens can vote on it, because you're changing the charter. I just want to make sure that we were all on the same page.
Yeah, we realize any action whatsoever when you're addressing this, that's why there's 3 options: do nothing, or vote on elected with these qualifications, or vote on appointed with these qualifications. And so it has to go to a vote unless we just recommend, and the council says we're not touching it, we're done. But otherwise, it will have to go to an election. Mayor?
So on the ballot, will the ballot say the following? Give you the option A, to continue to be an elected official with increased qualifications as follows: 1, 2, 3, and 4, or an appointed police chief with these qualifications. So do they get to pick A and B, or do you simply put out there, we're asking if you want to continue to elect?
You're asking the question that
Like
everyone
multiple choice. I'm asking.
Everybody on this committee would love for Julia to come up here and say, yes, we can do it, whether A, B, or R, but I have a feeling she's going to tell you exactly what it is, and you're not going to be happy.
hate to be the bearer of bad news, but no. It'll be a proposition that says we believe that the police chief should be appointed and then in favor or not in favor. That would be the way that the wording, and then you would go on to the next section of the charter, section 21. We believe that these qualifications should be adopted, and you would have your qualifications, and then you could vote either in favor or in opposition. So you could run into a scenario where the folks said they still wanted to leave the police chief elected, but you could have qualifications, or vice versa. They could say they wanted the police officer to be appointed, and then the proposition on the qualifications could fail. So each section of the charter, section 60 through 64, and you could, of course, add more sections, but those each would pass or fail on their own. You can't do a package deal.
Yeah. I'm sorry, which complicates it for voters, even more, and that's why, we wish that we could get more participation in these town hall meetings so that we could answer a question like that.
Do you feel through the interviews that you have done so far and the conversations you've had with people so far, have you felt like you have moved the needle in any way in a direction that opens up more support for an appointed police chief?
I'll answer that, and Billy, and you can finish up my answer, because first off, to be real honest, we have tried our very best not to move the needle for anyone. We've tried our very best, even though certain information we give says, oh, they're for that. Well, every one of us on this committee has argued both sides of this thing. I told them the very first day, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I'm going to argue both ways.
Yes, but if you've stayed neutral, that's fine. But in that conversation, do you feel like the person across the table from you says, oh, I never thought of it that way. Yeah, I want to do the following now.
The answer to that would be yes. But as far as moving the needle,
Yeah.
we've tried very hard
I
not
get
to
that.
try to do
I
that.
just wonder if the people listening to you have indicated, I didn't know.
Most of them, that's the answer we get from most people is,
And-
I did not know.
Yeah.
I did not know
Most of what I would think has changed is people realize qualifications are a necessity that we don't have.
Jeff, did you have anything you wanted to say?
We let him talk every once in a while.
I do wish that there were more people here that might give, I'm kind of curious as to maybe if you have some more input, or, because you kind of acted like you were, really maybe pushing towards.
I've been here since '62.
Right.
And every time I try to vote for the appointed, and it fails every time, so I'm thinking, is there a way we could make it harder for the elected to have some qualifications? Because I don't think we're ever going to get the locals to vote for an appointed chief. I agree, that's the best way to go. What, we're the only city this size is in the world that has an elected police? Oh, just in the state of Texas, well. Yeah.
About the world, though.
And so I'm thinking,
That's
well,
our
maybe
world.
the back doorway to get more control would be to change the qualifications so that you had a little more control over who could run. But I think it's an uphill battle, and I would love to see it happen, but I don't think it's gonna in my lifetime, maybe in y'all's lifetime.
Well, we do know that, yes, there's a contingent, there are people out there that really are adamant about, that it is, that they get the opportunity to vote. But I do think during this process, learning some of the fact that there are no real qualifications, that may help, sway where but it's interesting because on your first comment, I kind of thought maybe you were one of those that really wanted to stick with the elected. So that's interesting that you're.
The police department, and it's a personality contest.
Absolutely. It definitely is a personality. I think that's for sure. because people don't do the research to even know what are their qualifications. So, at least with the appointed, we know that there's gonna be a minimum.
Right.
So,
I have a question. Is there anything else y'all can do come November 17th to have more citizens participate in these town hall meetings? Like advertisement or any kind of, invitations? I mean, something that the place can be where more people can be aware and we can get more input of what they're thinking or what they don't, being informed of what's going on.
We will be having a conversation about how we can do that. We've hit every news media we could hit. I know that the city did send out reminders for them to publicize. I think they sent it out last Friday for the meeting tonight, and I didn't see any of that on there. So yes, we need to go back and relook at exactly what are we going to do? How are we going to get more people? Maybe, we've used every outlet that we possibly could. Sir, did you have a comment?
Yes, have you thought of maybe like going to Angelo State or Howard College and partnering maybe with the student organization or the administration to hold a town hall at the CJ Davidson Center, Houston Hart Center, or at at Howard College? Because I think that maybe people who are registered to vote, college students, they don't necessarily go to KSAN, KLSC, San Angelo Live. A lot of times you have to go to them,
Right.
but they're also passionate about the city they live in, and I think that maybe going to them and having a town hall for them, or just for the ASU community, whether they're staff, faculty, who maybe cannot make it to City Hall, but on their home turf. I don't know if that's even legal.
And that was actually one of our very first thoughts, was to have one at ASU, but we ran into some complications. We don't have any money to spend to rent a place and do this kind of stuff. So that's why
But, even though this isn't a single-member district conversation, the question mark in trying to get a larger audience is, should we be going to every single-member district and trying to do a town hall meeting in each district? Because then you might get more people, even though this is not a single-member district issue, it's a citywide issue. But I don't think people who live in Bentwood are going to come down to City Hall for an event, you know what I mean? And so the question mark is, how do you go to the people in a single-member district? And may I just say, on November the 17th, there's so much going on that date at 6 p.m., your ability to get somebody is going to be very slim. There's a lot going on November 17th.
I saw a couple of events, so that's right. But we had that exact conversation. Should we be going out? Should we have one in North Angelo? Should we have one in South Angelo? Should we have one in West? We talked about that. Of course, one of the things is we're limited in time. We're limited in locations. We have to go to places that we can not have to pay rent or anything. And then
Churches in each of those single-member districts generally let you use their facilities for free.
we could probably do some of that. So,
I mean,
but
that's
we
one
did
idea.
spend a lot of time discussing those exact same things. But we're going to have to regroup next week or so and look at what we can do to improve this for November, at least getting this out. And maybe the city, I don't know if the city can even pay for any type of advertisement to print part of this information. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. Maybe we need to talk about doing that also.
I
But
did have a conversation with Brian, and I think he is going to sorry, Brian, I'm speaking for you back there, but he can pay for some ad on the internet, so maybe we could do that. But I do want to point out also, we do have a website, costatx.us/charter. It has lots of information there. It has the video from the council presentation, which is essentially the same presentation, and there's also a survey form there where we can gather information from the community they will also consider. So these forums are not the only method to get the information or to give your opinions, but we do like the face-to-face and the ability to ask a direct question. So if people could come to these, that would be very helpful as well.
I don't see people going online and looking up this information. I never would. I just wouldn't.
Yeah.
It's not my interest level to do that. So I think we have to accept the fact, I don't think you're going to get a big audience with that. I think your audience is, well, certainly tonight didn't prove up that case, but maybe a more local single-member district might. And I don't know of anything printed, I don't know.
Well, one more thing that I just thought of, we are going to be on the council agenda again, essentially doing an update for council on where we are and going through this information one
Right.
more time, because you guys are very popular, and people do watch council meetings, so there will be an opportunity in that forum to at least gain the information, though, and direct people to the survey form, though it's, again, not the same kind of.
Could we, I don't know if this is possible, but I just wonder if, because people do watch Channel 17 and listen to the city council meetings, if at the end of each of those, you could tag on all this information, the presentation.
I would assume Brian could do that, yes. But we're gonna meet again. We're gonna call another meeting in a few days, and we're gonna discuss exactly what we just talked about. And we
So-
will look at the options with Howard College and ASU and some other things to look at, because I think that's a great, we talked about it, but I think we didn't talk about Howard.
So, I've worked in universities, so students have like a student activity fund. If you partner with a student organization, like, I don't know if there's a non-partisan electoral who's interested in getting students elected, but if student organizations can go to this committee and ask for money to rent a building on campus, they usually get a cheaper rate. And that's why I say partner with a student organization to, first of all, they could get that, but it's a partnership, right? So they can also market to they're better at marketing to college students than the city charter is. And so it would be kind of, they would bring you guys to campus and be able to use the funds from the student activity fund fee and put it on. So that's the only reason why I said partner with the student organization, because they have the ability to go and ask for money that they pay for already in their tuition and fees. And it's for a good reason, civic engagement, and it affects Angelo State students and other students. So I think that there'd be student organizations that would be interested in that. So.
Well, good. Thank you for the information, and we're certainly going to look into that. I'm going to ask Billy now if you will close us out.
All right. Well, really good discussion, and I appreciate that so much. So even though we're few in number, I think the discussion has been good. There have been some points of clarification, and I just think again about the feedback that we've gotten as we've gone out and talked to people, and they are saying, oh, no, not again. Here we are going to vote on this again. And Mayor, one of the people that I talked to, and we were talking about how San Angelo, as far as we know, is being the only city that has an elected, in the state of Texas, that has our size and all, that has an elected chief, is San Angelo. And this lady said, well, we're unique. That's pretty special. So we're unique. You may know who I'm talking about. But anyway, you know, in just casual
But
conversation.
Billy, I think that same person didn't want us to take out to the public for vote the sanctuary city issue.
Yeah.
So it depends on what the issue is in terms
Is-
of whether they want to vote or not.
Yeah, it is, and, you know, the cross-section of people, because the 7 of us on the committee have been from different backgrounds, different neighborhoods, different districts, and it's been really interesting, the cross-section of feedback that we've gotten from people that are, you know, absolutely pro-appointed. I just remember I talked to one lady, she looked at me like I was crazy, and she said, well, appointed, of course. And, you know, and that was, you know, and she wanted to just go walk down her list of why it should be appointed. I've talked to other people that elected is their way. They don't care what the qualifications are. It should be elected. I want to have my voice heard. And if somebody's up there appointing somebody I know nothing about, not interested in that at all. So, you know, we just get different feedback. So, you know, and that's why I think it's so important for people to come to meetings like this and you know, give us their feedback. Like, we've gotten ideas here tonight about how we can improve what we've already, you know, spent since July, when we started, I think, that we can do to try to reach more people and to make some clarifications. So this has been really good. So we do appreciate it. I thank everybody. I ask you to please fill out that little survey form, and Heather's at the back, and she's going to take that, and we aren't going to look at it. She's going to tally it for us, and at our next meeting, she'll let us know how it came out. All right, all right. So any other questions, comments, suggestions? Well, thank you, Daniel. We appreciate it. So, all right. Well, thanks again for being here. We appreciate you all. God bless.